we're about to get inside the mind of one of history's most pragmatic leaders, Lee Kuan Yew. And we're going to do it by putting his unique governing philosophy to a very modern, very high-stakes test.
So imagine this scenario, right? Tensions are flaring up between Cambodia and Thailand. Now, what would Lee Kuan Yew do if he were suddenly in charge of Cambodia? Look, this isn't just some fantasy exercise. It's actually a really powerful way to get to the heart of his unique philosophy of statecraft. So, just to be absolutely clear, this is a thought experiment. We're not trying to predict the future here. What we are doing is digging into his massive body of work, his writings, his speeches, all his documented actions, to build a really logical picture of how he would most likely handle a crisis like this.
Okay, so before we can even get into his actions, you have to understand his operating system, What were the fundamental rules of the game that guided every single decision he ever made? And his priorities? They were crystal clear. On one side, you've got the things he lived by. Stability above all else. A laser focus on what's best for the country, and this core belief that economic strength is the bedrock of everything. And on the other side? Well, that's everything he hated. Leaders grandstanding for the cameras, emotional nationalism getting in the way, and the absolute poison of weak, corrupt institutions.
Really, it all boils down to one single word: pragmatism. For Lee Kuan Yew, it was never about what felt good or what was popular or what ideology said you should do. It was about one single, relentless question: what works? That's it. Practical, real-world results were the only, and I mean only, metric that ever mattered to him. All right, so the crisis is kicking off. Things are getting heated. What's his very first move? It's all about one thing: taking control of the narrative and immediately lowering the temperature. We're talking turning a raging fire into a block of ice. Now, his playbook here would be the exact opposite of what you'd probably expect. Forget fiery speeches. Forget calls for big, patriotic rallies. No way. Instead, he would order his entire government and the media to just cool it. Speak calmly, stick to the facts, and frame the whole conflict as a boring, technical issue. Something for the experts to sort out, not some grand, emotional battle for national pride. And this quote right here tells you exactly why he'd do that. He saw that kind of emotional nationalism as pure poison, especially for small countries. He knew that the second emotion takes the wheel, you start making catastrophic mistakes. And for a small nation, just one really bad judgment call can threaten your very survival. And this ruthless focus on the present extends to the past, too. He would immediately shut down any talk of, ancient grievances or old historical claims. In his mind, history belongs in a museum. Full stop. Foreign policy? That has to be about the next 20 or 30 years, not the last 200. And this is the kind of calculation he would be making, constantly. He would see any potential conflict, any instability, in these cold, hard numbers. A 2% hit to GDP, a dip in foreign investment, to him, that wasn't just a number on a spreadsheet. No, that was an unacceptable failure. That was real people losing their jobs, real families losing their futures. Okay, so with the public temperature cools way down, the real work begins. But you're not going to see this on TV. This isn't happening at some big press conference. No, this is where the action moves behind closed doors. This was his signature move, really. Publicly, his government would be the picture of politeness, respectful, calm, totally diplomatic towards Thailand. But in private, behind those closed doors, he would be incredibly, almost brutally direct, just frank, clear, and leaving no doubt about Cambodia's red lines and what it expected. And here's the clever part. He wouldn't just show up with a list of demands. He'd show up with solutions. We're talking practical, win-win deals, where everybody gets something. He'd be proposing things like, hey, let's create a joint development zone on the border. Or how about we share tourism revenue? He was always looking for a way to turn a flashpoint of conflict into a source of shared profit. And this quote, this just perfectly captures his genius as a negotiator. He totally understood that the other side might need to look good publicly, to win face. And you know what? He was more than happy to give them that, as long as Cambodia walked away with the real prize, the tangible long-term benefits, the economic deals, the stable borders, the actual substance. He'd also be a master at using regional groups like ASEAN, but not in the way you might think. He wouldn't be there making emotional appeals for help. No. For him, ASEAN was a strategic tool. He'd push the whole dispute into its formal, often slow-moving machinery. Why? To de-escalate things, sure, but also to use the bloc's own rules to kind of box in his opponent and gain leverage.
But here's the thing. While all of this is happening with Thailand, he'd be lasered focused on what he believed was the most important part of the whole strategy, and that's fixing Cambodia from the inside out. We're talking professionalizing the military purely for defense, launching a war on the corruption that makes a country weak, and building an economy that's tough enough to withstand any external shock. And at the end of the day, this all comes back to one of his most fundamental beliefs. A country's power on the world stage is just a mirror of how well it's run at home. A strong, stable, prosperous Cambodia, well, it wouldn't need to shout to be heard, would it? Its strength would do all the talking. So you add up all these moves. What's the ultimate endgame here? What is the final goal of this whole strategy? Look, Lee Kuan Yew had absolutely zero romantic ideas about war. He knew from hard-won experience that when the guns start firing, the investors start fleeing. And he knew that in any fight between a smaller country and a larger one, it's always the smaller one that suffers the most from the chaos and instability that follows. So this is his grand strategy in a nutshell. It's not about winning one little border skirmish. It's about ending the very possibility of a fight. It's about locking in permanent stability and weaving Cambodia's economy so tightly with Thailand's that going to war would become logically and, more importantly, financially unthinkable for both of them. And that, right there, is the masterclass. That's the Lee Kuan Yew test. For him, a small nation's true power never came from the size of its army. It came from being credible, being useful, and ultimately being indispensable. The goal isn't just to survive a crisis. The goal is to become so vital to your neighbors and to the world that nobody can afford to let you fail. Which, of course, leaves us with a big question for today. In a world that seems to be getting more and more nationalistic, is this kind of hardcore pragmatism even possible anymore?